Blog Talk Radio.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Yaron Brook Show. 2 in one night, I'm telling you, workhorse over here. But you know, holidays are coming. I've got guests in the house the next week at least. I don't know when how many shows I'm gonna be able to do. I figure, what the hell, I've got some time. Knock it out. Plus, I promised you this show. We're gonna be talking about journalism. I said a couple of nights ago that I was going to do the show tonight, so here we are. Those of you who missed this afternoon's show, we had a three-way conversation with Onkar Gate and Greg Solomieri about Patreon, about free speech, about all the issues related to what's going on in Facebook, and but deplatforming on campuses and kind of the philosophical foundations for that. I thought it was a terrific show, a terrific conversation. I encourage you all to go watch it. You can watch it on my channel, or you can watch it on the Ayn Rand Institute's channel. And by the way, if you have not yet subscribed to the Ayn Rand Institute channel, you should. There's amazing content over there. There's a lot of the content that helped me learn objectivism on there. A lot of Leonard Peikoff's talks, a lot of Ayn Rand is on that channel that you can't get anywhere else. So I encourage everybody to go over to the Ayn Rand Institute YouTube channel and subscribe to that channel over there. Thank you all for joining me tonight, and I think we'll just it's a what is it, a double something? What do they call it in the movies when you shoot two movies in the same night? I don't know. I'm losing it. I want to talk today about journalism and. You know, the number of different issues related to this. But as many of you might know, Time Magazine declared the Person of the Year for 2018 the Guardians, and the Guardians they consider the Guardians to be journalism. And there's a lot of truth to that description with regard to what journalism should be. And what I want to talk about today is both the threats to journalism from the outside, and maybe to some extent, and as importantly, the threat to journalism from within. So let's first talk about the importance of journalism and why it's so crucial to have a free press, and why it's so crucial to have a good press, an objective press. So. Let's talk a little bit about the crucial nature of journalism. By the way, Super Chat is open, so feel free to use it. I know in the previous thing I didn't get a chance to answer questions, and I apologize for that, but we had a topic and it wasn't appropriate. But here, feel free to use Super Chat. I'm going to stick to the topic, at least until we've covered it, and then try to address the Super Chat maybe between this topic. And I want to say something about, I also promised this a couple of nights ago, I want to say something about this withdrawal from Syria, because I think it's so reflective and indicative of Trump and why I think he's such a dangerous president. But we'll talk about that. So I think that so let's start with the importance of journalism. And the founders understood this, and the founders write about this, about how important it is in a free society to have a press that is free, that can speak, that can write, that can let the people know what's really going on without fear of persecution. Let the people know what's really going on without fear of being shut down and silenced. And in a free society, in a society where we have granted the monopoly over the use of retaliatory force, and unfortunately, in the world in which we've lived in, really, since the founding of America, unfortunately, much more power than just the monopoly over the use of retaliatory force. It is so crucial for people to know what it is their government does, why it does it, how it does it. It is so crucial to know, whether politicians are telling the truth or not. It's so crucial to know whether they're following up on their promises. It's so crucial to know how they're spending our money. It's so crucial to know whether and when they want to go to war, whether and when they want to send troops or raise armies or raise money, that there's really a cause, that there's really a reason. In a free country, particularly as we give more power to the government, it is so crucial for us to know what we are voting on, whether the issues that are being presented to us are true or not, whether the problems are real or not, and whether the government in the past has been, or in the present, is competent in dealing with these problems or not. And this is all the role of the press. The press in a free society is there to let us know what our government is up to, what our government is doing, how it's performing its job, and to inform us about the world around us, about how things are going, about whether they are real threats or whether the threats are just imagined, whether they are real problems, or whether some demagogue is using made-up problems in order to stir fear and encourage support for them. So in a free society, in any free society, the press is crucial. A free press is crucial. And an objective press is crucial. It is so important that we know what is true and what is not, what is real and what is not, what is fear-mongering and what are facts. In a free society, this is what a press provides us. It speaks truth to power in a sense that it doesn't bow to power. It is focused on the truth. And it provides us, the voters, and again, the more democratic we get, the less free we get. In other words, the more powerful government gets, the more important it is that those who vote be educated, be knowledgeable. Now, I don't think that can save us from democracy. Democracy meaning majority rule, and democracy meaning no real protection of individual rights. But without even a semblance of truth, democracy allows the powers to be to do anything. We need to be informed. We need to know the facts. And in a simple world, in which there's very little, let's say, trade, there's very little travel internationally, there's very little going on that's relevant to our lives overseas, the press it's simpler, it's easier. In a simple world where we can see what's going on around us locally, and we need some information about what's going on around us nationally, but that's about it, then the press's job is relatively simple, still hard. But in a modern world, in which what happens 10,000 miles away from here has incredible relevance to our own lives, and where the world around us, just within visual sight of us, is unbelievably complex, where even local news and information is hard to come by, it's hard to analyze, it's hard to figure out what's true and what's not. The press's responsibility, the press's job, and the press's importance become so much greater. How do we make decisions in a world where we don't know what's going on? How can we make decisions, business decisions, personal decisions, and political decisions in a world where we don't know what's going on? So, for freedom to work, we must have information. For us to appreciate the value of freedom, we must have knowledge. And part of that knowledge is, how are things working? It's important for the press, for example, in the day we live in today, it's important for the press to be able to to tell us, for example, what's going on in Venezuela. So that those of us who might be tempted by socialism, wow, all right, that's what happens when you get socialism, all right. Those who might be tempted to invest there, those who might be even tempted to travel there on vacation. It's important to know what's going on in the world. If a war is going on, should that affect the freedom of the press? I mean, no, not if you understand freedom correctly. That is, the press doesn't have the freedom to put the lives of people in danger. The press doesn't have a freedom to commit treason, in a sense. So the press doesn't have freedom to report on everything that might endanger troops, for example, or that might give away secrets that are not theirs to give away. But in times of war, the press is crucial. Is the war going well? One of the problems with Vietnam is that I don't think, certainly early on, the press was very truthful about the reality of what was going on in Vietnam. They weren't truthful about the goals of what was going on in Vietnam. One of the problems with the press during the war in Iraq and in Afghanistan was that the press didn't report on the rules of engagement. The press didn't report on the lack of clear goals. The press didn't warn of the dangers that were embodied. And the press, the press didn't tell us the whole story. And it's hard in war. Now, this is the other thing I want to emphasize. That journalism is hard. It's hard to figure out what the truth is and what it's not in a complex world. It's hard to be objective. Look around you. How many people do you know who are objective about their own lives? About things happening in their own lives, about things happening around them, about things they are doing. How many people are objective about their own actions, about their own experiences? Being objective is hard. It's hard, not in the sense that it's impossible, oh my God, life is rough. It's hard in the sense that it requires effort. It's hard in the sense that it requires being on the premise of objectivity, being on the premise of reason. It's hard in the sense of, if you're a journalist, really getting multiple sources, examining them, evaluating them, being careful in who one believes in, and how do you verify sources. It's a real science. It requires real effort. It's a challenge to be a great journalist. It's not easy. And particularly given that all journalists come into the field with certain philosophical and political views. And how do you protect yourself from being biased by those views? So journalism is hard. It's not easy. It's not just like any other profession. Just like being good at anything. To be good as a journalist requires real effort, real skill, real work, real practice. And real feedback, the willingness to learn, the willingness to experiment, the willingness to get better. So here we have a profession that I think is crucial for freedom. It's crucial for decision making of the everyday person who doesn't have the time, the resources to go out and figure out what's going on exactly. And it's crucial. And it's hard. It's hard to do it well. It's harder to do it right. So this is the challenge we have. That particularly today, we have two problems that relate to journalism. One is that journalism has become almost unembarrassingly biased and unprofessional. And the effort, the skill has gone. It's also become very difficult to make money at journalism, and the business model is being destroyed, so there are fewer journalists out there in the field. And at the same time, and to some extent for this reason, although not really for this reason, but this is the reason that is given. Journalism is coming under massive attack. Massive attack from the government, massive attack from the population, which allows government now to attack the journalists. You see this all over the world. You see authoritarians rise up, maintaining the illusion of democracy, some degree of freedom. And yet, silencing the press left and right. You see that with Erdogan in Turkey. You see it in Hungary. You're starting to see it in Poland, where authoritarians who are elected democratically and who maintain the facade of democracy shut down unfriendly press or start up friendly press and shut out the unfriendly press and make it impossible for them to make a living, make it impossible for them to continue. You're seeing that across in every, in Russia, it's a joke already, right? I mean, Russia, I don't know how many journalists over the last 5 years have been murdered, probably by the government. It's taking your life in your own hands to be a journalist who is willing to be critical of Putin and his regime in Russia. And yet they have elections, and they have the pretense of freedom. Why do I don't need headphones. That's right. I'm going to start not wearing headphones unless I have a guest. Oh, man, this is liberating. This is good. So you're seeing it in all over Eastern Europe. Journalists have been murdered. Journalists who investigate government corruption have been found dead. This happened in Bulgaria recently. It happened when I was in Slovakia. There was big demonstrations because the assumption was the government had assassinated a journalist and his girlfriend because the journalist was inspecting or looking at corruption in the government. It happened in Argentina, where a journalist was killed because he was looking into the connection between the Argentinian government and the Iranian government around the bombing of the Jewish center in Argentina, I think in 2004. It happened, obviously, in Turkey recently by the Saudis, who murdered not exactly a journalist, a dissident, who was writing for the Washington Post, who was writing about Saudi Arabia in the Washington Post, and who was brutally murdered in the Saudi embassy, authorized by the Saudi crown prince, by the highest level of Saudi government. Now, Saudi Arabia doesn't even have the pretense of freedom, the pretense of elections, but it is a major ally of the United States, and the response has been meek to non-existent. So, country after country, I'm not even talking about China, where journalists are regularly imprisoned for the minorest offenses. Myanmar, where journalists go to prison for the most minor things, and many, many other. I don't know, there is journalism in Vietnam, I just don't know. But Poland, Hungary, Russia, now we're getting a similar situation in Ukraine, particularly if the journalist is criticizing the Russians. Then again, they're taking their lives into their own hands. So we're getting a situation in which the press is being hampered, the press is being controlled, the press is being intimidated into silence, fear. And instead of the government being the protector of free speech, instead of the government being the protector of individual rights, the protector of the freedom of the press, it is the enemy. It is the one that attacks. It is the one that criticizes. It is the one that murders and kills and violates those rights. So, all over the world, the press is under attack, journalists are being murdered, and there's very little uproar about this. There's very little seeming concern about this issue. And remember, the First Amendment is the First Amendment for a reason. The founders understood that there is nothing more important for freedom than the free speech and a free press. And in particular, the ability of a free press to criticize the government, those in power, those who have the monopoly over the use of retaliatory force. There is nobody more important to monitor because they have these tools of destruction, weapons, guns, big guns. They have the power of law behind them. They must be held accountable. They must be watched. They must be reported on. That is the job of the press. It's fundamental for freedom. And it's no accident that one of the first things authoritarians do, whether it's in Turkey, Hungary, Poland, Russia, certainly, is to try in subtle ways to silence the press. Now, this is why I believe that Donald Trump's presidency is so destructive and damaging. Because while he has not yet wielded the power of government, the power of force, the power of coercion against the press, he is softening up the American public for the day where that happens. When you call the press, when you call the media the enemy of the people, that is what Stalin did. That is what every authoritarian in human history has done. Because you have to first demonize the press. You have to first demonize them. And Trump has spent, it seems like, almost every day finding a variety of different ways to attack, to demonize, to denounce the press. Hasn't done anything because he has no power yet to do anything. And I doubt that he will ever have the power to do anything. I don't think Trump is going to end free press in America. But Trump is setting the tone. He's setting the context for that to happen one day. And Trump is not just any president. Trump is the president of the United States of America. Trump is the president of the country that has been a beacon of freedom for the world for the last 200 plus years. Trump is president of the country where the First Amendment in its Constitution is there to guarantee the freedom of the press, freedom of speech. Trump is the president of the country that everybody looks to as an example of free expression, of free speech, and freedom of the press. And yet, as president of this country, he has done more to demonize the press than any president in American history. Obama started it. Obama worked on it. He tried. But Trump has taken it to a whole new level and has even suggested that maybe it is inappropriate. Maybe it is wrong. Maybe there could be something done about the fact that the press is so critical of the President of the United States that the press makes fun of the President of the United States. Now that is beyond dangerous. That is going to be Trump's legacy. Trump's legacy is going to be the complete distrust of the news, of the media. Now I'll get to the question of whether they deserve it. I'll get to the question of whether they should be trusted. Because there's a real problem there which Trump is leveraging. He couldn't get away with this if the press wasn't problematic. But to argue that the media is the enemy of the people, and yes, he always says the fake media, the lying media, but who does he mean? All the media that doesn't agree with him, all the media that criticizes him, all the media that makes fun of him. Fox is okay, but NBC, ABC, CNN, CBS, New York Times, Washington Post, on and on and on and on. You always called the New York Times failing, which is kind of interesting because the New York Times is one of the few newspapers in the world making money. But anyway, that's a side point. He is basically demonizing the press he doesn't agree with. The press he doesn't agree with is the lying press. This, for one of the great liars of all time who've ever been in the White House. Right? An unabashed liar. And yet, they are the lying press. They are the enemy of the people. And this is, again, softening up the culture. It's softening up his base. It's softening up the American people to accept something a lot worse in the future. Yes, Trump is not putting journalists in jail. Yes, Trump is not shutting down newspapers. I think he'd like to. I think he'd love to. But he can't. Not yet. Not yet. But if enough presidents do this, if this is the new in, to demonize those you disagree with, to call everybody you disagree with the enemy of the people, to call everything you don't like fake news. Fake news doesn't just mean biased news. It means made up news. Anybody he disagrees with is making news up. This really is the end of America and the end of freedom as we know it if we continue on this path. If nobody stands up to Trump on one side and the left on the other side. Or maybe they're both on the same side. I fear to say they're probably both on the same side. This is the path authoritarians take. Now, what gives them some credence? What gives them some credence is that the media itself is unbelievably biased. Now, there are those who believe that there's a vast media conspiracy. There are leftists and there's some leftist cabal somewhere guiding all the media to do all these things. No, I don't believe that. Everybody always, for years and years and years I've been hearing that the problems in America is the media. The media is so biased. The media is so horrible. And if only we could fix the media, everything else would be fixed. And that just is not true. The media is biased. Why? Because our culture is biased. Because the people who go into the media are well-educated people. They go to good schools, and particularly if they go to the New York Times or they're at CNN or they're at Fox, they've gone to the best schools. They've gone to Yale and Harvard and Princeton. And what are they taught in Yale and Harvard and Princeton? They're taught this variations on this anti-individualist, anti-capitalist, anti-freedom ideology. Left, right, it doesn't matter. Our universities are philosophically monolithic. Our universities are philosophically anti-freedom. They're philosophically anti-free speech. They're philosophically anti-objectivity. The requirement of journalism to discover the truth. Our intellectuals don't believe there is such a thing as objectivity. There is such a thing as the truth. So when our journalism students, all eager to be great journalists and to discover the truth and to speak truth to power and to defend freedom, when they go to university and they study, their professors squeeze any ounce of objectivity out of them. They're told and they're taught that there is no such thing. The fact is that we live in a world dominated by, in the intellectual realm, by leftist ideology, by altruism, by the idea that the meek are the virtuous, That the more meek you are, the more you should sacrifice for. That meekness is somehow a standard that we should worship. This is intersectionality, but all of the, in all its different forms. That there is no objective truth, real truth. That everything is shaped by our experiences. Everything is shaped by our class. Everything is shaped by our race. Everything is shaped by oppression that might have happened to us 1,000 years ago. There is no truth. Then how can we do journalism? So I don't blame the journalists. I blame the intellectuals, the professors, the philosophers, the social scientists, the professors of journalism who teach them to be subjectivists, to acknowledge their biases and embrace them. So, the problem in the world today is a lack of good journalists, but the problem with the world today really, fundamentally, is a lack of good philosophy. It's bad philosophy killing us through bad journalism, killing us through bad leaders, killing us through an electorate that votes bad leaders into play, all feeding off of each other. Bad journalism motivates the electorate to vote in particular ways, pro or against. The electorate voting in particular ways creates a certain political class, which then attacks the journalists, because that's how you gain power, whether you're on the left or on the right. And of course, all of that is guided by bad philosophy, by bad ideas. And the main ideas with regard to journalism have to do with being objective. And being objective means getting over the fact that you're white or black or green or yellow, getting over your religion, getting over all the incidental parts that make you who you are, and focusing on reality, focusing on what's out there, focusing on what's true, what really happened. And I know. If you went to university, the professors told you that there is no such thing, what really happened. But there is. Reality is what it is. It actually exists. So yes, journalism is incredibly biased. CNN is significantly left of center. If you take the spectrum to be fascism and communism on two different sides and the middle to be some mushiness, CNN is left of center. Fox is right of center. Fox is just as biased as CNN. It's just biased by its own ideology. Neither one seeks the truth. And if you want to seek the truth, you're going to have to read both, in a sense. I don't watch any of them, so I don't watch anything, because I don't think you learn much from watching the news. You want to really understand a topic, read it, and then pick on what you think are the key issues, and then research those issues, and read more and read more and read more. You're not going to get to the bottom of an issue by watching television news. You're not going to get to the bottom of the issue even by listening to podcasts. You got to read. And reading allows for exploration. Reading allows for exploration because you can read a paragraph and stop and go read something else and stop and move back and forth. Make sure you've got full context. Make sure you understand what you're reading. All right. So, this battle between the lack of objectivity of journalism, which is giving an excuse to some to support the president's attack on journalism, this is very, very, very dangerous stuff. I would rather have a fully biased journalism, where I know it's biased, and I can correct the bias, and I can adapt the bias, than a president who attacks journalism constantly. A president who attacks the media constantly. I'm not talking about defending yourself. You can defend yourself against journalistic attack without denouncing the whole profession, without denouncing the profession as the enemy of the people, without ridiculing journalism as such, without talking about everything you disagree with as fake. So I am on the journalist side in spite of my criticism of the journalists. I'm on a journalist side because of the importance of the profession and because government should have nothing to do with it. The president should say nothing about journalism per se. If something's important, relevant to his functioning as a president, he should tell us what he thinks the truth is. And if he disagrees, he should tell us when he disagrees with the journalists. But he should have no judgment call about journalism. His job is not to speak truth to. They don't have power. He has the power. And this is the difference. Presidents have guns. Everything a president says has an implied gun behind it. Everything the president says is implication of force. And therefore presidents, for the most part, should shut up and be quiet. Once in a while, a good inspiring speech like Ronald Reagan did is fine. But other than that, I think too many press conferences, too much of this off-the-cuff nonsense. There's no dignity, and there's no sense of the importance of the job. He's got nukes, for God's sake. We've given nukes to a clown. So he has power, real power. And I don't think there's a conspiracy among journalists. It's just that they all come from the same school. They've all studied from the same textbooks. They all share the same ideology, or very similar ideology, because they all went to the same universities. And they all read the same books, and they all read each other's articles. And if you go into the intellectual world, what you see the intellectual world is dominated by is people on the left, people influenced by variations on Marxist philosophy. And I think I said this on one of the previous shows. I said something like, it's not surprising that all the Silicon Valley is full of leftists. Leftists tend to be, the engineers in Silicon Valley and founders of Silicon Valley tend to be very educated people. They tend to be people who have studied in the top universities, or if they haven't studied in universities, they've read all the top books. They've spoken to all the important people, and they've been influenced by leftist ideas because that's what exists in the elite, in the top, in the best. Whether we like it or not. The best thinkers out there, the best thinkers in particular fields, the best entrepreneurs, the best business people, at least in business ventures that appeal to young people, are leftists. The best financiers tend to be leftists. Look at New York City. Look at Silicon Valley. You want to change that? If you have a different set of ideas, then go start a company. Go create billions. But the fact is that most of the new billionaires are leftists, not because government helped them, but because they're really, really smart, and because they're really, really well educated. They're very, very influenced by other very, very educated people, and very educated people tend to be on the left. And maybe that's tragic, but maybe one should look at what the right represents to see why it's so unattractive to them. An affiliation of the right with religion, with anti-evolution, with things like that, makes them unappealing to intelligent people. So they don't ever venture in that direction. All right. So I'm scared. Donald Trump scares me. His comments on the media scare me. His willingness, it's not so much he scares me. He doesn't scare me. It's the fact that nobody seems to really respond. It's the fact that his base won't budge. He could shoot somebody in the middle of Fifth Avenue and everybody would still vote for him. In cold blood. He could say anything. He could argue that the First Amendment be repealed and his core supporters would, support him. I don't think there's anything he could do right now. Now, I don't think he could win a majority. I don't think under those terms he would win another election. I'm not sure he will win another election anyway. But it's scary how people have responded to him. It's scary the support that he gets. It's scary the unwillingness of people to criticize him. The fear, the intimidation, I don't know what it is. So I'm scared. I'm scared of the world. I'm scared of the world in which the President of the United States could say the kind of things that Donald Trump has said about the media, behave the kind of ways he's behaved towards the media, and nobody cares. Nobody seemed to care, except the media. But we dismiss them because we know they're biased. Well, unless you're Fox, and they are all truth tellers. I mean, Fox is so biased, it's unbelievable. And yet Trump supporters can't see it, or they don't care. So journalism is incredibly important. It's incredibly hard. It's failing today because it's become unbelievably non-objective, biased, pathetically biased, pathetically stupid in many respects. New York Times, Washington Post, places that used to have at least some professionalism associated with them. You see the kind of mistakes they made, the stupid things that they write, that all they'd have to do is check primary sources that they know is wrong, and yet they jump on stories. Now, to give them credit, they do apologize sometimes. They do retract stories sometimes, which Breitbart, I don't think, does. But it's just unbelievable how bad journalism has become. And this has opened up the door, I think, for the massive populist authoritarian attacks on them by authoritarians all over the world, and by our own president. And that's what's so sad and so scary. So scary. And I think Trump's response to the killing of journalists in Russia. I saw this video during the campaign. There was a video of, I forget who was interviewing Trump, and he was asked about, he had just said something nice about Putin. Putin's our friend and whatever, and he was asked about Putin killing journalists in Russia. And Trump's response was, well, we kill people. What's the big deal? We kill people. Now, that was the moment I knew I could not vote for Trump and would never vote for Trump. We kill people. Therefore, it's okay for the Russians to kill journalists, innocent journalists. What the hell? Who cares? Just people. They get killed. We kill people. They kill people. People get killed. From a future president of the United States. Not my president. Not a president I will vote for. No way. And unfortunately, you're seeing this attitude, this presentation of the press as the enemy. And unfortunately, Western Europe, by adopting hate speech laws, has done the same thing, the equivalent of the same thing. The government now is responsible for deciding what is too offensive, so offensive you should go to jail for. Teaching your puppy to do a Hitler salute, which is disgusting in and of itself. But hell, you go to jail for that? So what you're seeing is in Western Europe, a massive attack on journalism, a massive attack on free press, a massive attack on expression. I mean, people didn't talk about this, but the fact is that Charlie Hebdo, before they were attacked by the Muslims, and after they've been attacked by the Muslims, have been under enormous pressure and threats of suits from the French government because supposedly they facilitate hate speech. So you can't win. You can't win. If you actually criticize certain things that the government does, particularly maybe things related to Islam or things related to that, then you go to jail. And in Russia, they just kill you. And so the entire world has lost the sense of what free speech actually means, what free speech represents, and how to defend free speech. And America used to be a bastion of free speech, has lost that steadily since at least 1989, when it refused to protect publishers from the Iranians' threat against Salman Rushdie, then refused to protect the cartoons in 2006, those who published the cartoons. And free speech is in decline in the US, now with a president who is happy to condemn journalism, even though he has a gun in his hand, because he's the president of the United States. No threat, I don't think, that we face today is greater than the threat posed to us by two things: government's attack on the free press and the free press's unbelievable bias and irresponsible reporting. All right, I'm going to do some super chat questions. We've got a bunch of them piled up. Do you think Mises was miserable? I think he's a great economist, but I'm very skeptical about praxeology as an approach. I agree with you about praxeology. I don't think it's valid. I always tell people when they read Human Action to skip the first 70 pages. It's a waste of time. It's not needed. I don't know if Mises was miserable. I hope he wasn't. I admire him greatly. Greatest economist probably who ever lived. But I don't know if he was miserable. I didn't know him personally. I never met him. And I don't know that much about his biography. I don't think he was miserable, but he certainly was a great economist and deserved to be an incredibly happy human being. All right, this is Ludwig von Mises, for those of you not sure. In Germany, the playground for trying British ideas. Is Germany the playground for trying British ideas? David could look, what's this? David could look with Hume at his own skepticism, and play backgammon, but Immanuel can't. Okay, so you're asking kind of a tricky question. Germany takes ideas seriously. So Germany plays the ideas out. And Germany has had, particularly in the 19th century and early 20th century, lots of important thinkers, big thinkers. You know, Kant, obviously, who takes it to the limit, and as Liberal Deutsch says, Hume was kind of a fun-loving, adventurer, Don Juan, I think, but just a life-loving type of guy. Kant was the opposite. Dour, scheduled to the last second. I'm going to offend somebody, but German through and through. Sorry, Liberal Deutsch. But as a consequence, a real system builder, real influence, really thoughtful, really, according to Ayn Rand, really evil. And you get Kant, and then you get followers like Hegel and Schopenhauer, and you get a whole schools, and you get of course Marx, and it just goes on, Heidegger, and it just goes on and on and on of philosophers who have huge influence, and Germany really builds itself around that. So I don't think it's a playground for trying British ideas, because I think Kant's ideas are different than Hume's ideas, deeper than Hume's ideas, more influential than Hume's ideas, and more wrong than Hume's ideas, if that's possible. Deeper in their falsehood than Hume's ideas. So that gives you a little bit. Empurio, something like that. Can you please explain about quantifying rationalism? A lot of your arguments are based on rationalism, but isn't rationality itself subjective? Partially. Evidence data is never one-dimensional. No, but there's no reason you can't find the other dimensions and examine them and figure out what the truth is. I don't talk about rationalism. Rationalism is a particular school of thought. Being a rationalist is actually a negative in objectivism. It's being somebody who deals with floating abstractions, divorced from concrete evidence, and playing, in a sense, mind games and logic games in the mind rather than dealing with reality itself. But being rational means using logic to figure out what the truth is. Examining the world, collecting evidence, and being ruthless about not accepting contradictions. Being ruthless about basing all your knowledge on facts, on reality, on evidence, rather than on emotion, on speculation, on partial evidence, on a little bit here, a little bit there, looking at the different dimensions and discovering what is really happening. And yes, we all see things a little differently because we're all looking at it different angles, but I can step into your angle and try to see it the way you do. And at the end of the day, we see the table differently, but we can take out a tape measure and measure it and see it and give it kind of objective parameters. And being objective is not easy. Again, it's not hard in the sense of it requires suffering. It requires effort. It requires focus. It requires engaging the mind. It requires a commitment to doing it, So I don't think being rational is as impossible as so many people, as so much modern philosophy claims it is. You can figure stuff out. Some stuff's harder. Some stuff you need more evidence. You need more time. You need to look at from more angles. It's like figuring out what's going on in the world. It's hard. You have to read multiple newspapers. You have to look at original sources. You have to check. You have to recheck. But you can get there. And even then, I don't put on everything I learned from the news a certainty. I put a probability on it. I know it with some level of confidence. How much level of confidence? It depends how much research I did. But that's what rationality means. It means knowing what you know and what you don't know. And knowing with what probability you know what you know. And knowing what's certain and knowing what's not certain. All of that is being rational. And it's really hard as applied to figuring out the news. And those of you who want to just dismiss the New York Times or dismiss the Washington Post when they're biased, who are you going to trust? Who has journalists out there in the field? Who actually knows what's going on in the world? Who talks to sources? Who is doing the work? Well, it's the New York Times and the Washington Post and a few other outlets that are all biased. But where are you going to get it from if not from them? All the news that the other sources get, that the other, outlets get, is coming from journalists who basically work for a few news organizations and who are mostly biased. And then you have to adjust for that bias. You have to not believe what you hear, and you have to go examine. But you have to start somewhere, and you start with the New York Times, because that's the people that deliver the news. It's just nobody else. How can people with such intellectual sincerity as the LPAC-TV's documentary, I don't know what LPAC-TV is, but documentary, The Dark New Age, attribute Western success to Plato-leaning Nicholas of Cusa while presenting Aristotle and liberalism as an enemy of humanity? I mean, but why is that surprising? If they were good students in their philosophy classes, then Plato and Kant and Hegel, remember, said that contradictions are the essence of knowledge. It's all about contradiction. It's all about life is a contradiction. Reality is a contradiction. Everything is contradictions. Contradictions are what they are. And the world is full of them. Reality is full of them. So if that's who you've studied, if that's who's considered great philosophers, then, what do we expect from smaller minds, if you will? Now, I do think there's also a lack of sincerity. I do think there is a lack of thinking, a lack of focus, a lack of seeking out the facts and seeking out history in a first-handed way that leads people to these kind of conclusions. It's not just all honest mistakes. There's definitely evasion going on, evasion of history, evasion of facts, evasion of the lack of effort that you're exerting. But look, this is what is being taught. This is what our professors, whose job it is to figure out what the truth is and to convey it, or to convey the methods by which we seek the truth. They don't do that because they don't believe there are methods to seek the truth. Oh my God, I didn't know this. Oh, here's some truth. Yaron is a corporate trickster. I'm a corporate trickster. I have 2 corporations. I must be a corporate trickster. Trying to pull the idiots back into the center. You consider what I say the center? You are nuts. I am way out there, just on a 3rd dimension that you can't even conceive of. You think of left and right, which is the boring dimension where everybody's the same. I'm out here in a completely different dimension. Center? God. The Irans out there want corporate globalism. Yeah, I want globalization. I don't know what globalism means. I know what it means to you, which is BS. But I want globalization. I want to be rich. I want all of us to be rich. I mean, this is the kind of nonsense that comes out of, I don't know, the alt-right or the stupid right or just the stupid. I don't know. Super K Pill. I was debating a leftist and she said that taxation isn't theft because we consent to it by choosing not to leave the country. Is she right? This is a standard leftist BS. You have a right to your life, liberty, property, and pursuit of happiness, independent of where you were born, independent of what the government decides, independent of what your fellow citizens decide. As a rational being, you have those rights. Those are they are necessary for you to thrive, to survive, and to thrive as a human being. Freedom is not something people grant you. Freedom is something that is yours by your very nature as a human being. Freedom is something that you must be granted. You must be left free from coercion. And that's what freedom means. Freedom means freedom from coercion, freedom from force, freedom from authority. So it's not up to you to leave. It's up to everybody around you to respect your rights. It's up to everybody around them to respect your life. It's up to everybody around you to respect your property. They should leave if they can't do that. And what civilization requires, before voting doesn't matter if they all voted for it. Majorities don't matter. The right to life, liberty, property, and the pursuit of happiness is inalienable. It is what makes civilization possible. And to the extent that it is respected, civilization survives. To the extent that it is not, civilization perishes. And individuals perish. You don't have those rights by grant. You don't have those rights by permission. You don't have those rights because people chose to give them to you. You have those rights by your very nature as a rational being, as a being that requires the freedom to think and to act on his thoughts in order to survive. And therefore, morality requires that you be left free of coercion, which means no taxation. Oh, wow, okay. Heil Hitler versus Rule Britannica. Could you please explain the difference? Many people today would like to believe it means the same. It does not mean the same. I mean, it is sick. It is sick to believe that that is the same. First of all, Hitler is the ultimate in murderous authoritarianism. Him and Stalin, the brutality of their regimes, the single-mindedness with which Hitler liquidated people who he believed were his enemies. The Jews, for example, or gays, or, fill in the blank. By the millions. By the millions. There was no, questioning. There was no, he wasn't bringing civilization to anybody. He wasn't bringing values to anybody. He wasn't building railroads for anybody. He was there so that the Aryan race could rule and destroy and bring to their knees anybody who did not want to serve them. Now, Rule Britannica had many flaws. And certainly the way they treated many of the peoples in the colonies in which they arrived were horrible and disastrous and bad. And at the same time, They brought to those countries civilization. They brought railroads. They brought industry. They brought education. Think about India today and its relatively good educational system, relatively good railroads, products of English colonialism. Now again, I'm not justifying everything the colonials did. They were brutal. They were horrible. They killed. They slaughtered in many cases. But their purpose was not to bring the world to its knees and to enslave everybody. Their purpose was wrong. It was to bring Western civilization to the world. It was to grow rich, but mainly through trade. And of course it is Rule Britannica that did away with the slave trade. They eliminated the slave trade. I mean, Hitler did nothing good. Nothing good. And the scale of his evil is unimaginable. It's absurd to compare him to the British colonies. Again, many mistakes were made. Many bad people were put in charge who did horrible things. But at the end of the day, it was in the cause of something noble and good, and a lot of good was done. A lot of good was done. Doesn't justify the evil, but you can't evade the good. All right. Can you touch on if and how ocean property rights would work? No, not really. I'm not sure exactly. I know there have been some interesting experiments in places like Iceland with fishing rights, but I don't know exactly how they work. So let me put that on hold. I'll do a little bit of research and maybe do a show on that. All right. Liberal Deutsch, as usual, asking a lot of questions, putting a lot of money. I love it. Has AI thought about creating movie-like documentaries about the Renaissance in the style of the New Dark Ages with the right ideas? I mean, yeah, we've thought about it. It's just so expensive. It's so expensive, and nobody watches the documentaries. I mean, the reason maybe the New Dark Ages is being watched is because it's in the mainstream. But if we did a documentary, nobody would watch it. Part of the problem of doing an AI documentary, and this is why, and we've done, I've done a couple of documentaries. We did with a good friend who produced and directed the documentaries. We supported them. We did one on Atlas Shrugged and one on the financial crisis on finance. And they were both good. And they weren't watched. Nobody watched them. Nobody watched them. And none of the networks would take them. It's impossible to find them. And they were incredibly expensive. So, I mean, the truth is, to go to the masses, you have to do it cheaply, like what I'm doing right now. And in the meantime, you have to work on the intellectuals and you have to work on the universities, because there's no option but to change the culture through changing the universities. Okay, Bash Brannigan. Feeling Switzerland's compulsory private health care. Not sure what that means. Why is that a question? You can't have compulsory and private. Doesn't go together. If it's compulsory, it's not completely private. Switzerland is better than most European countries because it has a big private element to it, but it's still a mixed economy. It's still not ideal. It's still not perfect. Could be much better if it was not compulsory and if it had no public elements to it. Somebody's asking me if I could still consider myself an Israeli. I'll just take that even though it's not a super chat. You should ask in a super chat. Put your money where your mouth is. No, not really. I consider myself an American. These days, I'm a Puerto Rican, although I don't think they consider me a Puerto Rican because I don't speak Spanish. But, you know, I don't consider myself an Israeli. I mean, I speak Hebrew. I love visiting Israel, but I wouldn't move back to Israel. I wouldn't live in Israel. I want to live in America. Now, America's going against me, so how long will I still want to live in America? I don't know. But in spirit, I will always be an American. America might stop being America. Whoa, there's a thought. America might stop being America, and America is moving away from being America. I think under Trump, America is the least American country it's been in ever, right? And Obama and Trump have moved America way away from what America is, and I think even Bush before them. So America is moving away from what America means. I will always be an American, whether I live in America or not, whether I support America or not, I will always be an American. I am not a patriot for the place. I'm a patriot for the ideas, and the ideas of America are what I love. And I don't love the ideas of Israel. There's nothing about Israel. I mean, I love the spirit of the people. But most of that is because they are free and Western and maybe there's something uniquely Israeli, but it's not enough in comparison to what it means to be an American and what the founding fathers mean. I mean, I will take the founding fathers of Americans over any Israelis in Israel's history. All right, I'm gonna end here with a little thing about Trump and Syria. So a few days ago, the Trump administration, completely by surprise, said, we're going to leave Syria. Or Donald Trump really said it, because the Trump administration, for the most part, opposes Trump's view about leaving Syria. 4 days later, his Secretary of Defense, Mattis, resigned. But when it happened, I was like, leaving Syria? Wow. Trump declared mission accomplished. You remember, like Bush did in Iraq. We have defeated ISIS, and we don't need to be there. And I'm thinking, why is Trump doing this? Why does he suddenly, out of nowhere, want to leave Syria? And when I did a show a few days ago, I was going to say, I've got a conspiracy theory about this. My conspiracy theory turned out to be true, because information that I read yesterday and today revealed it to be true. But this was my thinking then. It was like, he's cutting a deal with Turkey. Turkey wants to go into Syria and wipe out the Kurds. The Kurds are a thorn in the side of Turkey, but the Kurds are the ones who actually defeated ISIS. The Kurds are the US's ally. And the special forces in Syria are intermingled with the Kurds. And they together have defeated ISIS. Turkey wants to go in, and they want to wipe out the military threat that the Kurds have become. And the Kurds have been fighting, and they've been trained, and they become good fighters. And this scares the bejesus out of Turkey. It doesn't enthuse the Russians and the Syrians either, but it certainly doesn't enthuse the Turks. And it's something has happened. I don't know what kind of deal Trump and the Turks have, but basically Trump is getting the American troops out of Syria so that Turkey can do what it wants. Which is go in there and crush the Kurds. Turkey has an army weaponized by the U.S. It's a member of NATO. Theoretically, the U.S. should be fighting on the side of Turkey. If you believe Turkey is an ally, you don't know what you're talking about. But Turkey is an ally because it's part of NATO. This is one of the reasons I don't believe the U.S. should be in NATO. And then it turns out, so this was my theory, and maybe it has to do with the murder of, what's his name, Kamouchi or whatever, the Saudi guy. And maybe Trump is basically telling the Turks, stop the heat on the Saudis, you leave the Saudis alone, and we'll get out of Syria and let you do what you want. Now that last piece, that I haven't heard any validation of, but it turns out that Donald Trump decided that he was withdrawing all troops from Syria on a phone call with Erdogan, with the president of Turkey. He's on the phone call with Erdogan. I mean, supposedly this is well documented. He's on the phone call with Erdogan, and he received, and the reason for the phone call was, now remember, Erdogan is a dictator, an authoritarian, a murderer of journalists, shut down free journalism in Turkey, is not a friend of the United States, is an Islamist, he's a religious Muslim who believes religion plays a crucial role in the running of Turkey, should play a crucial role in the running of Turkey. He is an enemy in many respects of the United States, or at least not an ally. Maybe not an enemy outright, but not an ally. Anyway, Bush is calling up Erdogan to tell Erdogan not to attack the Turks. He's got talking points that his foreign policy advisors have given him about all the points that he has to make to Erdogan about not attacking the Kurds. The Kurds are allies, the Kurds are friends, we want to protect the Kurds, and Erdogan shouldn't attack them. And John Bolton is on the phone with him. So John Bolton, who's actually good on these issues, he's actually good on the Middle East. John Bolton is on the phone, Trump is on the phone, Erdogan is on the phone. And Erdogan says, and Trump is starting along this line of, oh, you guys shouldn't hear the talking points, and Erdogan says, well, wait a minute. Why are you in Syria? He says. What is this any of your business? Why do you care whether we attack the Kurds or not? You've defeated ISIS, you've done the job, why are you in Syria? And Trump goes, you're kind of right. Why are we in Syria? And he turns to Bolton in the middle of the conversation and says, why are we in Syria? And Bolton gives the standard answer, and whether you agree with the answer or not is a different question, but you know, ISIS is not completely defeated, and there's a power vacuum in Syria, and if we leave, then that helps the Syrians, and it helps ISIS, and it helps, and you know, we need to make sure that ISIS is completely crushed, and it's not to zero, and it helps the Assad regime, and that's not a friend, and it helps the Russians. And Erdogan says, no, look, we will crush ISIS, don't worry. If you leave Syria, when we crush the Kurds, we'll take care of ISIS as well. And Trump says, he's right. He's right. Let's get out of Syria. And Erdogan is like blown away because he never expected this to be the outcome. There's no way that Erdogan expected Trump to just cave to his demands. And Trump did. And this is Trump. Now, whether you think the policy is right or wrong, this is not how you come to policy. I, for example, have been a critic of all our policy in the Middle East forever. I thought Obama was pathetic. I thought Bush was pathetic. I certainly thought Trump was pathetic. I don't need to fight Israel's wars. I don't want America fighting Israel's wars. I don't want America in all these different countries. I want all to come home. I want Afghanistan to come home. I don't believe we should be negotiating with the Taliban, which Trump is doing right now, negotiating with the Taliban for America's withdrawal. He's negotiating America's surrender with the Taliban. And now he negotiated America's surrender with Erdogan. I mean, it's perfect. It's perfect. And it's mind-boggling that this is a president anybody can admire. This guy has no clue. He has no clue. So, yeah. Anyway, this is the reason supposedly Mathis has left, and if you read Mathis's resignation letter, it's pretty scathing. And what I find interesting is when Trump was elected, in his first few months in office, a lot of his supporters said, look, yeah, Trump's a little bit of a loose cannon, he's crazy, and this and that, and that, but look at the team he's assembled. World class, right? Look at Mathis and Kelly and was the guy who was Secretary of State, who was the guy from Exxon, a businessman, and he had other businessmen. The guy at Health and Human Services was first class. All these people, and none of them are left. None of them are left. They're all gone, and they're all being replaced by mediocrities. So that's a Trump. Tillerson is gone. Tillerson called the guy who called Trump a moron. So they're all gone. Mathis now is gone. I was never a huge fan of Mathis, but a lot of you were, and he's gone. Anyway, quite a performance by Trump on national security. And at the end of the day, I want ISIS crushed. I don't think you need a lot of troops in Syria to crush ISIS. I never thought you did. You need to loosen the rules of engagement and let loose. And the Kurds are our allies. I believe in defending our allies, not necessarily militarily, but morally and financially, potentially, if they're serving our purpose, like killing ISIS for us, and with weapons. But Turkey is not an ally, but to give Turkey a green light to kill a real ally, which are the Kurds in that part of the world, not only is that a travesty, a moral travesty, but think about the fact that these Kurds have fought with Americans. These Kurds have fought under the assumption America would protect them. And now America is turning its back on them. And what will that mean the next time there's a 9/11? What will that mean when we do have to send troops again into the Middle East? Who is going to be our ally? Who is going to believe a word we say? Who's going to believe us when we have given Turkey the green light to slaughter them? All right, Liberal Deutsch, last question, asks, how should Merkel have behaved at Erdogan's visit? She should have ignored him. I'm not sure she should have been allowed to visit, but Erdogan is not a friend. Erdogan should be treated as an authoritarian, but nobody treats authoritarians like authoritarians. I mean, I've articulated my case for foreign policy and how authoritarians should be dealt with on another show. But I don't think you should treat Erdogan as just another friendly, freedom-loving political leader. He should be treated like the authoritarian he is, with a cold shoulder. All right. Thanks, everybody. Now, by the way, I just want to give a plug. Like a year and a half ago, I did a show on Syria, analyzing all the different forces and all the different incentives and who's who and who's fighting whom in Syria. I thought it was a really good show. And incredibly valuable information, and information you won't get anywhere else if you care about Syria. I don't know that you should, but if you care about Syria. So I'd highly recommend going back and finding it. It's on my podcast. I'm not sure it's on YouTube, but it might never made it on YouTube, but it's definitely on my podcast from July 2017. And so I recommend anybody's interested in foreign policy, anybody interested in Syria, go listen to that podcast. It was good. I have a lot of knowledge of Syria that is not common knowledge and that you're not read in most American newspapers about. All right. Follow me, subscribe to my YouTube channel, please. That'll be great. Share. If you like the shows, share them. I did a show earlier today with Onkar Gate and Greg Salamiri, and I encourage you to go watch that and share that and subscribe to the Ayn Rand Institute YouTube channel. And finally, those of you who are still willing to support me on Patreon, please do so. I understand completely if you don't want to use Patreon. If you don't want to use Patreon for now, I'd appreciate any support you can give on PayPal. PayPal.me/Yaron Brook Show. PayPal.me/Yaron Brook Show. As I work to find alternatives, although it's harder and harder to find alternatives right now because the payment providers are making it very difficult to launch alternatives. I'm still waiting to hear from Jordan Peterson and Dave Rubin about whether they have an alternative, and we will do what we can to facilitate your support of the show. As soon as an alternative actually exists, as soon as we can switch, I would like to switch out of Patreon and leave Patreon. I won't do it before there's an alternative, but Sam Harris has an alternative, which is on his website. I should have one on my website, and I'll be trying to build one ultimately as an option for that. All right. Thanks, everybody. I really appreciate your support. I really appreciate you listening to me on this Friday afternoon. If I don't speak to you before Christmas, have a fantastic Christmas. I might do a show on Monday about why Christmas is such an amazing holiday, why an atheist like me, an atheist raised Jewish like me, loves Christmas, doesn't celebrate really any other holiday. 4th of July and Christmas and Thanksgiving, those are my holidays. I told you I was an American. And why I think everybody in the world should celebrate Christmas. It's a great holiday. So Merry Christmas. I hope you get great gifts. I hope you have a beautiful tree. I hope it's all lit up. I hope you just have a merry, wonderful, happy, value-oriented holiday season. See you all whenever I have another show. Bye, everybody.